think because it's 9:32, we should
All right.
start. So we have an hour and we don't want to squander any of those minutes. Have all the BAT members here. You guys are the only ones here in person. David and Alice. We have Raj and Shawjoy on Teams, and of course Bill's here observing as it's his project. So I think without further ado, just let the team jump in since we've all this project last time. I think we want to maximize our time for discussion. So if you guys can try and keep your show to 15 minutes-ish, I think that'll give us a good 45 minutes for questions and discussion.
Great. Thank you again for having us. And my name is Stacy Silver. I'm William Brook. And here we have folks from Roadside, Brian Corcoran and Jim Steen. We have folks from Bonster Harrison Architects, Adams Architects have okay. We provided the materials as Laura mentioned, we're highlights. Well, these are some of the slides that we're not going to share today. The four substantive areas that we're going to focus on are preservation and movement of the Tasty Diner in response to from DAP and also from DAP and specifically HPC. The building's design and compatible relationship with the existing and planned master plan recommended development along Ramsey Avenue. Discussion about the Georgia Avenue frontage and the building and parking design along Cameron Street. As staff indicated, we had in their staff report, we have received the Historic Preservation Commission, who is jurisdiction and decision-making regarding the historic Tasty Diner. HPC specifically is jurisdiction regarding the preservation, relocation, placement of the Tasty Diner and its contextual relationship with the building. They have specific focus and they focus on the base of the building adjacent to the Tasty Diner and have really emphasized and encouraged us to be focusing on the horizontality of that base, which is the design that the design team has done and which share with you today. We are going to try to limit our presentation to 15 minutes if we can, and I'd like to now to DHA.
So before we get to the slide presentation, we're going to go through the video to kind of give an overview of the whole project at the street level.
Just to let you guys know, speak up a bit. Teams folks said they're having a little trouble hearing, and it looks like you guys are not.
Oh,
there we go.
I can restart, restart and pause at the beginning first. There. Okay, so starting at the video walks down Cameron Street, starting at Georgia Avenue. And so at the Georgia Avenue face, you can see the building corner comes all the way down to the ground, and we've put as far out as we possibly can to cover as much of the existing Verizon building as we possibly can. Start the video. So along Cameron Street, where the site is narrow, we used a combination of material and planar changes and lights in the base to separate the building base and middle. And on the ground floor for the whole Cameron Street facade, there'll be 20 feet of clear glazing with activated commercial or amenity space on the interior. And so it's a space for window shopping, and the residential portion of the program space will be for residents to hang out and be visible from the sidewalk. And you can see here the diner car is now pulled out as far as possible from our building, which is pushed back as far as possible on Cameron Street at this point. So the building's pulled out. We've rebuilt the back corners of the existing diner and attached it back to our clear glazing at the ground level with a small bridge piece. And then
I'm sorry, if you could stop that. Can you stop it?
Yeah, can you pause it?
Can you explain why you did that? Why did you pull it out to the street? Interested.
Well,
that's a big move.
Yeah,
the diner at least.
Yeah, well, its existing location is at the sidewalk. So we wanted to keep that presence it had on the street. And also, before we had it integrated into the building, and it wasn't reading as its own volume. So pulling it out and
last was detached. I mean, detached with an arm, but it was separated, which was a great move from the first time where it was literally attached.
Yes,
So, and then this is now, I was just wondering why you guys did that, that's all.
yeah, so we wanted to have it read as
It's
it's,
been one time, Paul. The DAP has only seen this one time.
Yeah,
No.
the first time they had the front facade of the diner right on the
Yes,
building.
that's what the DAP seen. We've seen this
Okay.
iteration, but the DAP
Okay.
has not. This is just the step since the.
yeah, if we go to the slides, we have a progression of.
Okay.
how-
We have a progression. I just, very pointedly, it was something that HPC was pretty adamant about. And I see Dan, thank you, shaking your head, yes, that volume of the streetcar be as prominent by itself as possible. You know, we have concerns, and I think this balances the line of also having it be usable space contiguous with the retail behind it, such that a user can effectively operate within it. So as we mentioned, there are a series of slides showing the evolution, and we can go through those.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, so you can switch to the slides now. You press F11, it goes full screen. So. A little bigger. So this plan, so as a refresher, or go to the first. You go to the first plan, previous page. So there's a refresher of where we were last time, where that was the location of the preserved diner, and that was like, so in yellow, you can see what we would need to preserve, so it was minimal of what we had to preserve pushed into the building. Make it a little bigger. Can you zoom in?
Into that part.
My old eyes.
I'm sitting up front, I can barely see it too.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, I don't feel so bad then.
No,
good.
no.
All right, you go to the next slide. So this is where we are now. So we pulled the diner car out, rebuilt the back corners of it, so it stands as its own volume and with a kind of hidden connection behind it, behind the rebuilt back corners. Then next slide. So this is a progression we went through with the HPC, and we didn't share it with DAP last time, but I think it's important for context to show our progression of how we integrated the diner car into our building. So initially we had it butted up against a solid corner, and then we moved the solid corner up to free up the space behind it and give it a more clear background. Then that was too heavy on top, so we removed that, have an entirely glass and metal background pointing down at the diner car. Then we took that idea and carved out a space for the diner car and extended the facade behind it up to the top of the base and broke it down to the top of the fourth floor. So it's broken down both horizontally and vertically. We pulled out the diner car as far as we can, and we've extended this special corner as far down Ramsey as we can. So it's more broken down on that face.
And just for the benefit of the DAP members, Dan, can you just clearly articulate what the HPC is currently mostly focused on?
Sure.
And how they see these options as being final, not final, work in progress, so that DAP knows what to comment on.
Right. So, I mean, first of all, we recognize that what we're seeing is sort of the iterative process, and the HPC had an opportunity to look at the previous scheme and the placement of the car and how it connects to the building on their primary focus. Next week, we'll be hearing another preliminary consultation with the HPC on this scheme. But this was sort of revised based on a lot of the feedback. So we had sort of a split opinion of a lot of the commissioners thought that its placement was appropriate in the last design. Others wanted to see it have more of a relationship with the sidewalk of the street as it historically operated. Others had some other things that may or may not have worked at all. And we've spoken with the development team about that. But the HPC's primary goal is to or our goal with the preliminary consultation next week is to get the HPC to give a thumbs up on the diner's placement, how it connects to the new building. We recognize that, you know, sort of the base behind it is also a work in progress. We don't have any materials to respond to. And the HPC tends to be a reactive body rather than a proactive body. So if there are feedback that you have specifically about the base behind it, the HPC is happy to listen to it and they will take that in. But they respond to the designs that are presented and sort of evaluate it as to whether or not it's compatible or not compatible. But again, for next Wednesday's HPC hearing, which is in anticipation of going to sketch plan, the only thing that we want to do is lock down the placement of the dining car and how it connects to the building.
Can I, one comment, or if you wouldn't mind chiming in on this, it's just, can you chime in about the horizontality of the banding there and how HPC staff and
So, yeah, I mean, what I will, with an asterisk in front of it saying that, you know, we're only responding to this piece in isolation, not how it relates to the rest of the building. But one of the things that, in working with staff, is we wanted some sort of relationship with some architectural vocabulary between the dining car and the immediate surrounding area. The division pattern was drawn from the window pattern in the dining car. So what you see above is sort of an expanded version of that. The HPC thought that that was appropriate based on, you know, just breaking down the design, but they didn't have an opportunity to talk about materials or how that was going to function. But they also recognize that that's another thing that needs to be, that will be evolved as the project moves forward.
so materials are things we'll be focusing on at time of site plan. So we're not there yet, either at HPC or DAP or planning staff.
Big thing that we've been working on too with staff was making sure this thing's usable in the future. You know, the dining car is like 700 square feet. So nothing in the world in the F&B realm can operate in 700 square feet and be effective. So how the sidewalk integrates with it to create outdoor seating, and then enough canvas and flexibility from the diner through to the new construction to provide an operator something real that can survive. So we're not left with a little empty kind of former diner that, you know, is trying to relive. So we provided a lot of flexibility with the sizing of the interior and how that outdoor cafe could flow. Cause, you know, I'm not a diner operator, so I'm not promising that there's gonna be a diner open there, but we want to create the best canvas possible for a future operator.
I think Praj has her hand up.
How would you all like, do you want us to continue through and then wait for questions, or should we do questions throughout? Do you have a?
I think it's probably, you just continue unless we have some clarification questions.
Sure, although if Praj has her hand up now, since other people asked questions in the middle, we'll let her ask now, and then going forward, we'll just finish the
Okay,
presentation and hold your questions. So Praj, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I'll hold my next questions until the end. But as Dan was speaking, Dan, this is just mostly FYI, and I know we really, you know, like the sessions you guys did with us last time was really helpful. But I think it was just to the point where the treatment inside the cab is there like specifications on what can be put inside that cab and what can be attached to the existing cab structure or whatever? I mean, I was just thinking about like the future use that was just alluded to of the cab.
So the HPC's regulation is only for what can be seen from the exterior. So as far as what the interior treatments are, the HPC really has no authority. You know, if this were a building that were multiple volumes instead of a single volume, we would, you know, if there were like a wall that was intersecting with the window, we would say, you know, the wall needs to be moved so that it doesn't interrupt that window. But in this case, as long as they're not chopping it up into many smaller spaces, and at only 700 feet, I don't imagine that's going to happen. the HPC is not going to take, I mean, they don't have the authority to take any position on that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, can you go to the next slide? All right, so this shows our design evolution of the diner in sections. It shows how we pulled it out, and now it's completely away from all the overhangs of the building. You go back to. So here's as you saw in the video, here's the diner at the street level with transparent street activation space beyond it. And the diner is pulled out as far as possible to the sidewalk level and at grade. Next. So here you can see the whole base behind the Tasty Diner. So it'll be transparent parking or transparent street activation space for 20 feet. And then above that will be a parking garage facade with horizontal banding to echo the existing diner car. And there'll be opaque panels along with perforated metal panels, and the opaque panels will be a height where it'll block car headlights when they're parking in those spaces behind. So here's our view from Ramsey. So you can see our separated dining car and our unique facade treatment that wraps the corner as far as possible. And we broke down the base vertically and horizontally along the Ramsey elevation to scale down the massing at this point in relation to the lower rise buildings across the street. And both our site and the townhome site are zoned for 300-foot tall buildings. At this portion of the site, we're not going up to the full 300 feet. And our building, our tower is set back significantly from the base. Now switching to the Georgia Avenue side. So to respond to the comments of the existing Verizon building. So the blue is the plane, which is as far as we can pull our facade to the property line. And based on our last step meeting, we took the hatched area with arrows and pulled that to as far as possible as well to cover as much of the existing Verizon building as possible. And above the Verizon building, we're setting back the building to have a more dynamic facade on Georgia Avenue. Here you can see the rendering from George Avenue without all the clutter, the diagram. So you can see the strong corner coming down of the glass and metal. And then you can see the base materials with lighting, perforated metal, and then brick on the Cameron side, which shows a strong datum separating the building base and the building middle tower part. Next. So here's some possibilities for fenestration patterns and materials on the building. So at the base level, it'll be clear glazing for 20 feet with a minimal, so as clear as possible with minimal separations between the glass. And above that, we'll have our base, which will be perforated metal panels going in and out with different planes and lighting, vertical lighting that goes along the facade. And
Sorry,
bricks.
the perforated panels? I'm not following.
Yeah, so inside the bricks, that will be perforated metal panels. At this scale,
Opening areas.
yeah,
I gotcha. Yeah.
yeah. So that'll be parking garage. It'll be open parking garage with
It's gonna be
ventilation.
combination of perforated metal and glazing, which
Yeah, with more glazing on the George Avenue facade. And then above that, we'll have metal and glass facade with inset balconies to kind of carve up the massing above. Yep. So here is a massing view of the building from Georgia Avenue. So this is diagram showing the base and then middle and top of the building. So the base, like we talked about before, we'll have brick and glass and lighting and perforated metal panels. So the blue area in the diagram would be all clear glazing.
That's 20
There's
feet.
also, from that rendering we saw previously, the corner right now is showing entrances for the potential retailer activation on both Georgia and Cameron on that hard corner. There's flexibility if it became multiple uses to add storefront entrances as you work down Cameron too. But they'll be really user driven, but trying to bring that activation to both the Georgia and Cameron corner.
Yeah, so the entrances and the canopies will be developed further at site plan.
Middle.
Okay, so building middle tower. So that's gonna be the metal and glazing in a grid-like pattern and also intersecting building masses of opposite colors.
A different coplanar relationship on the facade to get the recess that we want, which you will see on the next slide.
Next slide, so that,
Top.
yeah, so then the building top or cap. We'll have vanity terrace with a sculptural penthouse space. So that this building will be a landmark in Silver Spring and the sculptural penthouse be visible from downtown Silver Spring. Yeah, we're on the last slide.
Yeah. So this is-
Okay, so here is a close-up of the transition between the base and the middle of the building at Cameron Street, where our site is very narrow and we can't accommodate a very large step back. So we're using the step back we can accommodate along with carving in balconies and changing in plane and materials to get as much difference between the base and middle as possible at this point. And by carving in the balconies, we're using the space and it's going to be private indoor-outdoor space for the residents. And then last slide. So we're just going to end on the view, looking from Ramsey Avenue at the Tasty Diner car with our unique corner that wraps. And now we can open it up for questions.
Thank you.
Now, I think we said it last time, the passing of this building that you guys did at the corner of Ramsey Cameron of Canting. I think it's an extremely strong move. Very nice.
Thank you.
And, but the problem is how do you present it then? You know, and what happens from there? Because I think you're, you know, if the diner wasn't there, you're creating a space, right? And perhaps with the diner there, it's still a wonderful space, but if the question is, you know, where the spaces are. And right now you have sort of the space where people gather sort of at the ends of the diner rather than out in front of the diner. And so I don't know if that's a big deal, but one of the things that I think is an issue, and I think it's an issue that we've seen before in Silver Spring, particularly with the developments that happened over at Ripley, is you know, most of the buildings that come into Silver Spring have garages above ground. You know, Bethesda, a lot of our garages go underground. So it's not a problem. And so you have a base and then you have the tower above it and it's one composition. Here with the garages, it, you know, it sort of bifurcates everything and it sort of separates, you know, this sort of the base, what I would call the base, which is like the retail area, the base, which is the podium, which I would usually call the podium, and then the tower. And I think we need to figure out a way of tying that tower into the podium, into the base, as well as we possibly can. And we worked pretty hard on at least the last Ripley project to do that, because they came in with metal screening garage, and it was totally different. So I would suggest, for instance, and again, I think, the HPC has some comments that frankly, the horizontal nature of this very tiny diner, if you amplify it by creating horizontal striations of that podium that are the same as the diner basically visually just goes away. You don't even see it anymore because it's part of the horizontal striation of that whole thing. I think, and I think you've done some schemes that are much better that, you know, and for instance, in this view, if you would be able to view this view a little bit further to the right, you're starting to see it here. I think you're creating a nice base when you bring that brick vertically around. You have some horizontal striation in the openings of the brick, but it's, you know, that base is more, I think, in line and in keeping with the tower. And so you start to see then the connection coming all the way down, which then contrasts to the diner so that the diner actually is, you know, celebrated. Because it's not buried in either the sort of the cantilevers that are coming out over it or that horizontal striation. So I think that would be my biggest comment. And I think, you know, it would be an interesting discussion to see, you know, potentially how we can deal with that. But I think, you know, I think the location of the diner, I think that's the one, you know, one way or another, we want it to stand out. But I think for the fenestration, and this will ultimately come with site, but I think the fenestration of that podium is very important.
One comment response is just in terms of the public space, is that there's no public space for this property, just per the sector plan recommendation. So the area that is beyond, I mean, we brought the Tasty as far out as we can.
Yeah.
It's space that's kind of bonus space, candidly, but we don't get credit for it, but it's obviously space that's enjoyed and will be enjoyed by the residents. So that is obviously the challenge with the sector plan recommendation and kind of comments in terms of where that outside space is.
Yeah, you guys, we'll give you bonus points because you created a space. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, the property line along Cameron jogs, right? So at the, you know, existing bank building, the property line jogs, I think it's 5 or 6 feet. That was done with the dedication in 01. So we have, in my opinion, kind of an arbitrarily inboard property and build to line, which is one of the challenges. And I think Trini's on, yeah. And Trini could probably speak to it if we want to delve into it. But, you know, we tried to delicately balance the in and out of the diner and its relationship to the public space. You know, we had contemplated this as a node where, you know, people traversing the green loop could stop, read a marker, understand the significance of the diner. You know, the customers of the F&B could presumably eat outside, and could be used by the general public. So, you know, it was a delicate balance.
Good job.
Now Joy has her hand up. I just want to give her a chance to speak. Go ahead.
Hey, I think it's really a logical move to shift the diner out and tilt it to make it parallel to the street, which frames the entrance plaza. Although I have 2 comments, the entrance plaza looks like just, you know, Paul just said it, quite small compared to, you know, how we celebrate the diner now because we make it so pronounced. Is that a way, I know that you said we're not going to get any benefit of creating space. It'd be nice to make a plaza even slightly larger, just compared to the gesture of the diner. And my second comment is, it looks like there's some kind of great change along, sorry, I don't know this row along this. Is it Hamden?
Ramsey.
Yeah.
Ramsey.
Yeah.
And I saw some steps, you know, creating as well. Is it a way to make this plaza just one level so it's more like an integral space? Because right now it's a stepping. I saw that there's the elevation changes from 2 different interior. Like
Can you
370.
rotate that, guys? Thank you. I mean,
Go back.
the short answer is yes, there's a grade change. We had to pick a point in which, or multiple points in which, as you traverse east to west down Camden, where we have grade breaks in order to maintain the entrances Jeff mentioned earlier, and have a, single elevation within the building. But there is, and if you could rotate around, I don't know if it's in the video
Yeah.
or still shot, another significant plaza
Yeah,
on the east side of the diner.
There's opportunity for gathering and outdoor space on both sides of the diner right now. Right now, there is
So here-
significant grade change
have
going
the-
up to the diner.
ISO image that shows very flat. I mean, I can point out where
Go
it
to the
is,
video.
but
The video.
I think the issue is that the stair that's shown right there in that slide next to the entry to the diner and is awkward because it causes a fall off along the public right of way. And that's easily solved. It doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't impact your design, doesn't impact leasing. It just needs to be looked at more carefully. Yeah, that's all. I think that's
Yeah,
a
here.
negative response. If I could, I'd just like to say, the great Dutch architect Aldo van Eyck said that only in heaven do architects get extra stars for extra effort. That you all deserve a star for your extra effort. I think the way in which you've dealt with the diner is far superior to the previous scheme. And it gives the diner some proper relevance. And so
Thank you.
it's really.
Thank you, yeah.
That being said, I think there are some odd things that could improve the design. I go back to what Paul said, so I'd like to emphasize that. I think emphasizing the horizontality above is not an advantage for you because it takes away from the distinctiveness of the diner. And so if we want to privilege the diner, which we all agree should be done, then the facade behind it has to be the opposite so it stands out. And that's a delicate thing. So it requires both a balance of horizontality and verticality. And so as you study that, right now, the horizontality dominates and there isn't enough vertical elements that extend from top to bottom in order to balance the horizontality. And so it's that balance that I believe the Historic Commission is responding to, and you haven't achieved it. The next thing I'd like to say is that the sloping of that facade is a detriment to the overall strategy. And why is it a detriment? Because it distracts from the diner again and becomes something that's bigger than the diner, more prominent than the diner, and is not necessary. Third thing, since you're using a perforated panel that you ripped off from Morphosis in his house, Tom Main's house, I saw it in the reference.
Yeah.
That's a great thing to rip off, so please continue. But when you do, take that same perforation and extend it into this new base that you're creating in front of the diner or in back of the diner. Look, the strategy that you took of essentially making bases, if I could, one up at the corner and then one at the rear is a really good strategy. The rear base has to be integrated without being duplicated so that it can be distinct. My next point. It just seems to me that since you've recessed a little bit, you can continue the recess to the, that would be to the east. So that, and it doesn't impact retail at all, because it seems to me that that little protrusion there is the entry. Is that right? To the
Exit.
entry to the residential?
Yeah.
All right. So you can push it back a little bit on that and continue that recess all the way to the corner base, what I'm calling the corner base, and then downplay the entry to the residential, right?
Just make sure I understand.
Yeah.
Are you saying, so we have the
Yeah,
reset
that-
here
Our entry
and
recess.
recess
Enter recess.
Extend it.
Yeah, it's
to
that
the
one.
east.
to George Avenue?
I want
Towards
to.
George
Oh, plan.
Avenue.
We're clearly in the discussion phase. right?
Yeah, so that is. Yeah, let me.
Well, it's important because I like to use the analogy of a balloon, right? You squeeze one end and something else happens.
Here's the plan.
else. So there's a couple things I just, this box, if I could use the term sacred, is incredibly important.
Mhm.
Jeff is
Yes.
working with somebody. I think I started to leave some breadcrumbs. at one of our last meetings as to who that is. So maintaining that space is sort of critically important. Now I think what I was saying, there's room here.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that becomes the juncture in which the two forms come together and how we treat that, to your point about, pulling it in. I think the Bonster team can look at that, but I thought this would be helpful to guide any conversation.
Yeah, so my point is that the corner piece, which is you're showing in pink at the corner, has its own base. And you want to distinguish it from the base to the west, which is the facade and base that's responding to the diner. And how they come together right now is really awkward, and this plan shows that it's even more awkward than the drawings seem to suggest, because they're plain contiguous. That's not a good thing. And so you have to find a way to mitigate those things. And I would argue it has little impact on any leasing capability, because what we're talking about is the residential lobby. And I'd also like to say that the lobby entrance doesn't have to be so pronounced. All the residents know where the entry is. And so that's not what you want to feature. Instead, you want to feature what they care about, which are the retail entries, so that they become pronounced.
You're giving the residential renter a lot.
Well,
Care about them all.
I know where I should go when
Yeah.
I'm entering. And if you think about all the great mixed-use buildings in New York City, the residential entry is never a predominant thing on the facade. It's
Because they get
much more
$1,500 a foot for retail space. And it's so.
whatever. So those are really my primary
Also look
comments.
and providing flexibility from, depending on the user, if they ever wanted to spill in larger than that footprint, to not constrain them from the lobby design. So that could be an open system that you see a lot of times, most commonly in our market or greater market, in hotels, where an F&B component can spill into the hotel lobby. We're providing that flexibility so that a user, if they wanted larger space and during their operating hours, if it's a cafe of some sort, could spill into the lobby.
Is that notch between the pink and the purple something? Like, is that a notch or is that
Probably
a
the
different
fire
use?
control.
That's the
Yeah. That's what it said. That's what it says.
This is a
Fortunately.
great discussion. I don't know if other members of the DAP have things to say. One point to just confirm, we did confirm this with the HPC staff. And we're all coordinated now, so you know what our combined position is, that all of these points that are being raised are well within the purview of the DAP to comment on. So as you come to that site plan, we can work with you on options, but please take note that the horizontality and the stepping out are not set in stone at this point, which is also the determination of HPC. Just want to clarify that very clearly and turn it back to members of the DAP.
The only thing I would say about that is that we are hearing something different from HPC commissioners, right? So we need to have clear direction on that point. So,
Well, and that's sort of the challenge with this project. I mean, not just, it's odd in that the four walls of the Tasty are the master plan site. So we as HPC staff can sort of constrain them on this, and ordinarily a master plan site is the entire property. Like that's what's designated. That makes it really clean. Here we have the Tasty Diner building itself, and wherever it goes is where the master plan is. So I think the HPC would like to have some input, but they recognize that, or we recognize that they don't have pure regulatory authority over that larger piece, because it doesn't actually connect to the Tasty building. So
Unfortunately, it seems to me that what you are looking for is a black and white solution, which is it is horizontal or it is vertical. And what I'm suggesting is that it is a balance, that in the end, it can have some horizontality. It will. The overall length, that portion of the face is more horizontal than vertical. That will set up a horizontality. But it is a balance between horizontal and vertical, which is in the visual is always the case. And if you suppress the vertical in order to get a simple idea about horizontality, you will destroy the presence of the diner. And I think that's the difficulty in your position. where you like
We're
that black
okay
and
with that.
white.
And
And I was,
we don't need black and white. We just need
Clarity.
your direction,
Yeah.
clarity.
well, and I was gonna say, if I may,
Yeah.
right, some of these are site plan level
Yes.
issues. We're in a
Yeah.
difficult position in so much that, you know, we're asking your group, but also HPC to opine and approve the location of the diner. We recognize the challenge in doing that without having some greater context, right? So like, we have self-imposed or opened ourselves up to comments from the HPC on the architecture of the backdrop, right? And that was at their request.
Mhm.
So if I may, to your comments, I think what I'm hearing is both groups are okay with the sighting of the car and the sort of massing relationship to the bigger project. We do need to further refine, and I think this can be prior to site plan, sort of what that is, how the horizontal and verticality natures. We can work with Dan and Rebecca, and we'll certainly be back in front of HPC again. And, you know, there's going to be a year's worth of time sketching and an evolution of that facade.
Mhm.
And I think we can continue to work on that and shouldn't necessarily get on it too much today. We hear your comments, we have them written. You know, we can bring those two bodies together in some fashion.
Also, as the design progress,
Oh, I think to go to the next step, sort of move on from this issue, could we go to the slide that shows the tower? Because I think what the comment earlier was that, you know, HPC has been seeing this just a piece of the building, and we're talking about a whole building here. And so you guys did a phenomenal job of addressing our previous concerns. And I think it was really well done, the siting of the diner and how you've shown all these renderings so we can understand the space. We can see where the challenges will be, those grade changes. You'll need to make sure people aren't falling there, you know, but thank you so much for doing that, because I think that is so important for us to understand how it sits in the context. But let's go to the one where we can see the whole massing of the whole building. What now I think is the challenge is how does that facade work with the rest of the building?
Yeah.
This is a complete building we're looking at. And what's really important, this is the first 300-foot tall building that's going in
Yeah.
Silver Spring. So what's happening on the top? How does that massing work? It's going to be an icon. It's going to be a beacon. And so I think you guys did a wonderful job addressing the street condition, which is a hugely important part of our task here. But it's also, what's the character of this building, and how does that corner on Georgia Avenue provide an opportunity to carry all the way down to the street? And then how does it vertically express itself in the skyline?
Yep.
So what's happening? How do we, right now, and I know where your focus was, but right now it looks very chunky. And so how the amenity on top will be wonderful. How can we break down that mass there as we're moving the design forward so that it's a complete architecture, so that as we're re-envisioning what's happening with the diner, we're also thinking about the materiality and the expression, so it ties into what's happening on this facade.
Yep.
And so I know that's sort of the next step, but I think that's a really important piece of the furthering of the design.
if I may, so yes, what you see here in our development, one thing's happening, this is actually 2 blocks,
Mhm.
2 towers touching each other. So there is on the roof, you will see a separation of the roof levels and a skyline and top creation. And this image that where it shows some of the ideas or inspiration that we're working on. So you're right, the skyline, it's first 300 building, but it's not gonna be a chunky all 300 blocks. We will sculpture the
No,
roof.
sorry, finish.
Yeah, we will continue on working on the roof and skyline.
I don't remember what slides they were. But candidly, we agree. We like light, we like
Yeah.
airy, right? We like lots of windows and natural light into the units. A lot of those things come from sculpting the buildings, right? You know, I think your point is, you know, to the left is just this sort of consensual massing, right?
Yeah.
The next step, and you know, I don't know how to demonstrate it to you. I think some of y'all are gonna come tour some of the projects we've done
Mhm.
in the city. But now is the time to start sculpting, right? What's the percentage of, units with balconies? How does that penthouse set back, right? Like, what is that crown? How do the, residents interface there? I think we have a unique opportunity, Ronnie mentioned, that image does not do a great job of showing the two masses that have, I think, a
Yeah.
6-7 floor difference. So you really have two crowns with the residential core in the middle.
Okay.
This site is wide.
Yeah.
It's 300. How wide is this site? So one of the
Yeah.
challenges was
Yeah.
to break that scale down. It's narrow, but it's wide, right? You don't want this wall.
Sorry, I have a couple more comments that are related to this and just because we have the parking deck that's above the street level, that corner, there's no parking spaces there. Thinking about programmatically what happens on the corner of Georgie and Ramsey as that glazing comes down.
Georgia.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Cameron,
Yeah.
sorry.
Uh-huh.
Georgia and Cameron at the corner here. So what, I know, because I was the one who asked about units, which I knew that would be a challenge on Georgia, but there will be units across the street on Georgia Avenue. So thinking about is there any use or activation that can happen in the corner?
That is a tiny little space and parking happening, but you're right.
But is it an art moment? Is there,
There is.
so it becomes like this beacon coming down to Georgia Avenue and thinking about that is like the sort of where you're
There
really
is that.
spending money on your materials versus the rest of that.
It could be a lot of things.
It's that.
There.
How do I say this? The first level of program parking now is anticipated for that retail user. It could be a glass elevator with activation.
Yes.
Could be this
Mhm.
sort of marquee corner. And then once you get above, it could take a different, relationship.
Yeah.
You guys can't come out anymore because the right of way is, I was gonna ask.
On
Yeah, I would love
You
to.
don't allow projections in the public.
Yeah.
space like that.
Yeah.
Go back to the ground floor plan.
No,
Yeah,
we-
'cause
the-
I saw the Verizon building right
The
of.
short answer is no.
Just-
Stacy has slapped me back
Yeah.
many
If
times.
they ever tore that building
have
down,
to
they
go
would have to
Going
back.
up to the line. Okay, I was just,
Never gonna
I
do
just,
Unfortunately, it's gonna.
This is
This is
Okay.
our
property line right here.
The red one.
oh, okay, so that's the right of way of all the other, I just saw the other one, so I just wanted to ask.
The Verizon.
No,
We've tried to buy the Verizon building. We've tried to redevelop it and we've asked them if they could tear down the first 15 feet. and all that.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay,
We came all the,
We can't project our doors.
I know,
yeah.
I saw that, so you're pulling back, so.
Yeah.
Another piece of the massing comments that the DAP had last time were how the building relates to the townhouses. You guys want to address that at all, or does the DAP feel it?
Let me go back to that one.
Yeah, so go back.
Go back to the slide.
Go back to the
Yeah.
slide. Right.
Visual.
This one.
Yeah,
I think there's.
there's one where it goes a little further.
There's a street section that
Yeah,
shows
there's a
that
nice street.
relationship pretty clearly in the package.
Ronnie, why don't you go back to
The section's all the way.
Yeah, it's.
It's the last page.
Yeah, it's like section 5, I think.
Yeah,
So I think the one, as he's finding the slide, as you saw on that, can you pause there for 1 second, Ronnie?
Is this a
Yeah.
different, is this a smaller package than?
We just
We just
have
rearranged.
everything. We just.
Yeah.
Asked us to shorten the
So,
presentation. Yeah. Do you want to just talk about that and then we can go to the cross section?
so here you can see that how the building is actually stepping back next to Ramsey, and also the planar broken down into, different elements. And further along in the tower above, it's stepping back again. So there are several layers of stepping back next to the Ramsey that's happening on the building.
But we're not gonna run from the fact that like this project is tall,
Yeah.
okay? And there's townhouses next door. We have experience doing this in other urban environments, and I think the way to do that is to create an airiness within the podium and start to step back.
Yeah.
I think we discussed last time briefly, we have done sun studies.
Yeah.
Fortunately, by dumb luck, candidly, we don't cast any shadows on the townhouses.
they also have an existing condition with a high-rise multifamily even closer.
Yeah, 300,
and-
yeah.
And that one does cast shadow.
On Fiddler, and that's a 12-story building.
Yeah, so that's the one.
Yeah.
That's the one. So
Prior to them building townhouses.
I'll bring that one.
We, for whatever it's worth, have met with lots of community organizations. We've met with the HOA several times
Right.
of that townhouse
So that.
neighborhood.
No, keep going.
They're actually very excited. They want more retail. They want a more vibrant community.
This is S4, it's S5.
So, yeah, so here shows just one layer of stepping back amenity and public area on top of that, but there is a couple of more layers happening above. So gradually stepping back the towers.
And I think somebody's comment early on in the phone call was potentially even to pull the base out, which allows further relief at sort of the roof elevation of the townhouses. So we've played around with, how that jogs in the recesses to create that definition.
It's next.
I think there's one, this is the full section of tower sitting back.
Yeah, and you can see we're not going up to the full 300 feet at this point.
And this is what answered your question on this area. We're not going 300. And then if you just go along towards Georgia, then the second tower going up, creating that skyline.
Interesting that the townhouses were rezoned as well to 300 feet.
Yeah.
I know, but they're single family owner, it's gonna be, but I think I think you've done a good job addressing the issue. I think cities are interesting when you have the townhouse, in Manhattan, you have the townhouses next to the big building. I think you can do it and it works well. And this section is really helpful to see. And I think the articulation in your view of sort of the masonry grounding, I know this is the loading side of your building and you are challenged there. So I think careful consideration about the materiality and how you sort of push those entrances back. All of those things are some great examples recently in Silver Spring up near the metro there where they've done it. And actually near the library, they do a really good job going into the neighborhood of their loading and trash is right there on that street that goes into the neighborhood and it's grounds and it works well. So
Yeah, as Brian mentioned, like of all the community groups that we've talked to, like the warm welcome to change here versus what they've kind of lived with unactivation or whether they like what shook out around a Tasty Diner or not 24 hours a day. Been really positive. There's also other development sites that could come along in the future, whether it's the Cubanos parcel that you can see that single story there and some others around.
The parking garage.
Mirror.
Yeah, the parking garage.
They're there. We had lunch there yesterday. No, we've talked to them. I think, we're working with them now just on an interim basis to let their customers and staff park on the Tasty parking lot until we start construction to be good neighbors. And their comments, like they're hoping that it's just going to boost their business by providing more residents there, more activity and better quality. So it's been, listen, they've been around since, I was in high school before that. I joked with Brian yesterday, my high school girlfriend was a waitress there. But I think just creating more energy and life in this kind of like little hidden intersection of Georgia and Cameron, where somehow you ended up with 3 food and beverage users. Cubano has been there for a long time. Before that, it was a long run with a family-owned Chinese restaurant who they actually still own the building, that family. So it's how can we, with creating, what we were showing with Tasty, respecting that Mi Rancho is the institution that it is with huge outdoor dining, Cubanos, which is also elevated and dealing with some funky topography there to create a little pocket of life.
I think because you have perforation screens as one of the tools, you have the opportunity to shape that perforation so that light doesn't leave parking garage onto that street.
Absolutely.
Helpful. And then the second thing is to the extent that you can emphasize pedestrian scale lighting along that residential street rather than lights featuring the building, which is fine on camera, but on this street, you don't want to do that. I think that will also help mitigate the impact. Because I agree with what everyone else is saying. Cities like Toronto, which have a juxtaposition of scale, have light. But you have to remain sensitive. So I think in the size down at night, by the way in which you light, can really help.
And the beauty with our market versus some of a New York or Toronto is we're not a late night market. So,
Yeah.
you know, where they have to deal with that, you know, almost that, you know, spilling into the evening hours and the energy and the lighting of food and beverage operators. I wish our market had it, but we're just not. So I think it is easier for us to, in the evenings, tone things down from you know, a brightness and disruption to who lives there now.
Trini is your landscape architect?
Yeah,
Okay, so, between Trini and you have a big problem that you need to resolve. And it's a little problem when you look at this plan, but as my former boss, when I was out of college, would tell me, that's where all the dead cats and candy wrappers go. Your corner right at Verizon is where all the dead cats and candy wrappers are gonna go. And you don't want that on Georgia Avenue. So I think you really need to figure out what's gonna happen in that little space that's being created, because Verizon will never go away, right? They're causing the problem, but you guys have to fix that problem, because that's just where, you know, when you have wind.
Yeah.
And everything's gonna conglomerate right there. And so,
I mean,
So
we're-
we'll
hope
go
you guys
back,
look
right?
at it and figure it out.
yeah,
And I know Bill's quiet, but he knows I went to Maryland, right? I had a professor one time, and the best combatant to that is eyes on the street.
Well,
So-
or something, you know, I don't know what you can do to that side of the Verizon building to, you know, to put something there that's actually something that would be of interest to pedestrians walking down Georgia.
Yeah.
But
Trini raised
something
it.
has
I
to
think
happen
if-
there.
I think if we were leaving it to, if it wasn't multi above, and to Brian's point, and the kind of the extra care that we take of our properties,
Mhm.
if it was just gonna be a retailer and nothing above, and understanding how their sensibility and the staff sensibility of leaving it up to them to monitor how it shakes there versus, you know, our investment in the vertical element above this, I would have that concern. I think when you see how we own and maintain our projects, it's a little different, but I don't.
I mean, sweeping it every day is one thing. What I'm talking about is bigger than that.
Yeah.
Can I,
That's just, it's a place, you're walking down the street and you're gonna see this dead corner, this little recessed dead corner that no one ever is gonna be in. And I just think, you know, hopefully maybe there's nothing physical right there, but something visual has to happen right there to make it so that it doesn't look like that little corner where everything just kind of.
can I
Bill's gonna paint a mural.
ask
Yeah.
emphatically again? And I know Stacy's probably gonna kick me, but I got this thing over here. There's no way to project into public space or do public space improvements at the streetscape.
yeah.
I do have to tell you, like in other jurisdictions, that is one of the greatest benefits to a project is above grade projections. It creates dynamic buildings. You're allowed improvements with maintenance covenants for different materials and planters and door swings and eliminates those opportunities for these dark corners. I just keep getting told no, so I'm asking again.
Well, we'll work, you know, I work with DOT, work with everybody to, you know, could it be a mural that's on the Verizon building? Could it be, you know, a little water feature or something? Could it be, I don't know what it could be,
I
but
mean,
something.
there is a good example of a project in Bethesda called Novel. It is that condition at a bigger scale, where you have a project, it has a little bit of a public space in front of it. And adjacent to it, there's an existing building that pulls forward in front of that little space. And so the way they are thinking about treating that facade, even though they can't really touch their neighbor's building,
Mhm.
is they're putting, you know, a backdrop to that little space using art and landscape and things like that. And that shrunk down to be the appropriate sort of scale and size of this little nook, which I'm concerned about might just solve the problem. You guys can look at that and try to think of this as part of your backdrop to that corner and try to fix it. And landscape, lighting, art, and those are all site plan details.
Maybe lighting.
It's all done.
Which is sort of a good segue. So it's 10:32. And I think we have to wrap it up. The DAP has to sort of opine on whether they need to see this again during sketch. Have we sort of, do you feel that the applicant team has answered enough of the sketch plan level concerns? So less about materials and more about siting, massing, and sort of those overall things. So that's the question for the DAP. And that's kind of a, yeah, it's a DAP determination.
Can I ask a question? Does
Yes.
that mean that the next review is focused only on materials and?
Well, so it depends. Yes,
Material.
if you say you want to see it again at sketch plan, then it means they're still coming back and addressing some of these massing issues that were brought up and less about the material. We know the materials and fenestration patterns come later. If the DAP says, we've talked, we've covered enough of that stuff, we're comfortable seeing it the next time at site plan, that's going to be, yes, then it's what the conversation is going to be about materials and glazing patterns or fenestration patterns and some of those, more of those details that we've been discussing. Also, just so the DAP is aware, the project hasn't yet gone through the sketch. We've been talking with them before, they've submitted for sketch plan, so they have to go through all that and then come to us once they've made it through and they're in site plan. So there's some, Stephanie can speak to the timeline, but there's a timeline there.
So, but the DAP can choose to say, and we're comfortable with it, but at the time of site plan, we would like to see X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And we can do it that way, and it would be a condition of approval of that report at sketch plan. So if you're comfortable where they are now, that we will get to it at site plan, and you want to go that route, you can. If you're not, then you can ask back, or we go to the planning board with the sketch plan.
If can we make continued comments on the massing at the top in site plan and say, we need to carve this more, it's not achieving the objectives of the design guidelines.
Yeah, I think
Like we can still.
smaller moves, yes, not bigger ones.
Well, in that case, I think, for me, I'd like to see it again before we write off. I think there's still massing issues that have to be addressed. I think they're on the right path. From my perspective, I think the strategy that's been pursued for the diner is very sound, but that talks about what I would see as a component of the whole, and the rest of it needs more. I'd like to see it again so that we know where it's going with the top, which is obscured and not articulated yet, and know more about the base.
Okay.
On the backside and how it intersects and intertwines with the corner base. That's how I would.
We hear.
Can I
Yes.
make my case?
We have to hear
Let's
from
just
the other
hear from the
DAP
other two,
members,
and
yes. I think, that's not giving me the numbers of who raised first, so we'll just start with Xiao Joy, because your picture's on, and then Praj.
Just by hearing all of that panelists' comments, I think I would like to see in site plan, because a lot of the massing comments could be addressed in the site plan. And I think, the base is done really nicely now. I don't see like critically major comments regarding the massing. So that's my opinion.
Praj?
Yeah, I actually kind of agree. I feel like a lot of the one major comment was, if I remember correctly, is the location of the cab and just the whole historic, I guess, regulations around it. And I think the group has done a good job of responding to that. They, I think, have given us a response appropriate and a great response to what the concerns were. A lot of the other, I feel like, and maybe I'm hearing it not clearly, but I really feel a lot of the other comments regarding the materials and the massing or something. The way I look at it is like kind of going to be an evolving process in design either way. I mean, maybe once whatever HPC comes back with their requirements about does the facade need to reciprocate to the cab or the horizontality and stuff like that? And if they back off, that facade and that massing might end up looking different, or the treatment of that building might end up looking really different than what we are seeing right now. So I would like to move forward a little bit. I feel like I think they responded to what our comments were. And so, yeah, I kind of think I would be totally okay seeing this at the site plan level.
I'm dying here.
I think that I also feel comfortable seeing at site plan level, taking into consideration the response that we got from our initial comments. However, I caveat that with the fact that I feel like there might be more intense comments than you might normally get because it was very difficult to understand the massing of the towers. So we might say something like, you have to take off a piece of that top so that it's more refined and loose. But I think that it will help the discussion if we can have furthered architecture and can see really what you're saying in more of a detailed view, because I think it will come down to a little bit of the materiality, how it's applied and what location.
So I would
For the building.
then we can add that as some sort of condition, if
Okay.
you choose to let them move forward to site plan, that at the time of site plan, they must address X, Y, and Z, the mapping at the top, or, the base behind the diner, be a little bit more specific on the things you want them to address to move forward to site plan.
Should I list?
So yes, we should start listing them, so we can
Okay,
include.
all right. So I think how the skyline, the profile of the tower
Okay.
is incredibly important, what's happening on those upper floors. And seeing views from down the street on Georgia, so you actually get an understanding of how it responds, from further away. This is a really tall building.
Mhm.
What we had for this review was very up close, which story, but we
Yeah.
want to get the story of that building in the block further
Okay,
down.
further down, okay.
Georgia.
Mm-hmm. In a bigger context, site context, okay.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? David would like to add?
Well, I think we need this element of the westerly
Yeah.
base,
Mhm.
and how it is developed relative to diner.
We'll see all.
And
the
in
stuff, right?
particular, how those two bases come together, which I don't think is developed right now or articulated as two.
Mhm.
Because of the way the massing has been developed.
Okay.
So that means that you have to walk both directions. You have to walk from Georgia
Mhm.
to the west, and you have to walk along Cameron.
From Ramsey to George, yes.
See those.
Okay.
Okay, and Raj?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I had it in my little notes. The other thing is also that, there are like 3, it seemed like pronounced points in this building where one is like the Tasty Diner itself, so that needs its own place. Then we talked about the residential entrance. Does that need prominence or not? And now we're also talking about that corner between Georgia and Cameron. And all of this is in a very, very linear time, like site, as in it's so the way I look at it is like kind of a challenge. And I'm because in some ways I'm like, well, keep one, in any sense as a developer, I really want to spend money on one entry. If I have to do on 2, then at least it needs to be worth it, right? So it's more like a comment on, it would be interesting to see how you guys handle that, where the prominence of the urban character of the Georgia and Cameron intersection, but this whole prominence that the Tasty Diner and area around needs in a very tight space.
Thank you.
Okay, and Chad, anything to add to the list of things we need to see at site plan?
No, I mean, if we, could address the plaza comments I raised earlier, that would be great.
Okay.
The other thing I just wanted to again mention or reiterate, just so again, DAP members understand, is that we don't have public open space on site. It's required for it to be off site. So that's,
Yes.
And I think what's really important, to the earlier comments, we're making sure that we don't have any of these conditions of the change in grade from the sidewalk to the public space, because I am less concerned with the size of the public space,
Mhm.
that how the sidewalk interacts with the entrance both to the residential building and to the
Mhm.
Tasty Diner, and you have a challenging situation there. And I think Trini can solve it wonderfully. But like thinking about the street furniture, what are the planters? How is that working?
Yeah.
How can people circulate around that? And as you further the design, also thinking about how you have a user at that point, you know, there's going to be back of house spaces. And so how that all works within that space as you're developing further the architecture of the backdrop to the Tasty Diner.
Mhm.
That's a lot of things I just listed off. But I think that that's a really tough little space there.
Mhm.
So it's more about the public realm interface and making sure that. Can I make one more comment about just the facades that I didn't make earlier, since we're going to site plan?
Yes.
I think thinking about the orange and how it grounds.
Yeah.
Is really important. I thought it was very successful on across from the townhouses when it actually grounded.
Mhm.
And I think there might be places where you can think about grounding it so that the purple is more of is emphasized,
Mhm.
because you don't have a lot of play with the depth in your facade along Georgia Avenue. Thinking about the materiality there on the corner will be very important.
Okay.
And might help with some of these issues we've been talking about, like the recessed corner. And so using that architecture and the skin of the buildings to really address some of those comments. I think, and
That's a good point.
something
Yeah.
about floating masonry sometimes.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So-
Yeah, we'll look into that. Yeah.
Big piece of steel that's holding that stuff.
Yeah.
Just
Just
stop
keep it
there.
down, and it'll be less expensive.
Yeah.
and It'll
There,
create nice texture at the street environment. So this is a diagram, but I think when you come back, it's really important to us to understand how those materials are working together to really enhance the public realm.
sure.
Same comment would apply to projecting bay.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I don't think.
Okay.
So.
Right, so we're, I just want to, 45, so I think, so we'll obviously summarize all of this, you know, copy of this and of the list of that side plan. Next time, project will be on the other side, hopefully on the sketch plan. So that's at least a few months out. Yeah. It's good.
Administrative question, if I may, right?
Yes.
We've discussed lots of things. I think that's extremely beneficial to have some collaboration prior to just submitting a site plan addressing the comments we heard today. Like, is there a mechanism to do that?
say that again, Brian.
Staff continue, you know, I mean, our whole job,
Site plan,
Okay.
coming back to.
yes, to do a.
That's what I'm
pre-
saying.
yeah.
Yeah, that there is a process to do that.
Like,
Come
your
as often as
the
you want.
sketch plan is
Yes.
from
Yes.
Same
Correct.
exact.
Got
it.
Got it.
You can always cut, the DAP will convene every time you ask to come.
Okay, perfect.
So you guys can.
That's what you get from DAB members, like, maybe not every time you ask to see us, but.
In this forum,
But it has to be this forum, right?
yes, it has to be.
Yeah.
And I mean, we meet with, staff meets with the applicant whenever you want, but it has to be in this forum.
Got it.
DAP. So.
Okay.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.